Hi, good afternoon, everyone. When I heard that I'm the last speaker, uh, I felt nervous because I felt that I had to be engaging to the crowd because it's already a little bit later in the afternoon. For everything, I'd like to introduce myself. My name is Robbie Torres. I'm the president of Auto Delta. We're the local dealer for Volvo Buses from Sweden exclusively. Um, our footprint in the Philippines, we're one of the newer bus brands here in the Philippines. We have a sales and service facility, a showroom downtown in Alabang, Muntinlupa. And we have, right now, we're operating under 3 manufacturing facilities, one of which is owned and operated by ourselves in Subic Bay. And 2, we collaborate with a third-party builder, Del Monte Motorworks, one of the older bus builders here in the Philippines. And as we speak, gauging our experience through the past few years that we've been carrying the brand, we're expanding. We have a new footprint in Hermosa, in a business park in Hermosa, Bataan. And we're also building a new a new manufacturing facility for buses in Carmona. And this year, last year, we also started an Auto Delta Institute, an institute for, we're basically training the next generation of fleet operators. I understand we're on the same business of using equipment. So we're trying to address the challenge of how to move forward with Euro 4 or in our case, Euro 5 equipment. Anyway, before I start, I'd like to ask, who here drives a car to work? Kindly raise your hands. Okay. Thank you. I think my job is done. Well, who here experiences traffic in Metro Manila? Anyway, thank you. The reason I ask, when you talk about traffic in TV and radio, to the point that each morning is a negative vibe morning because all you hear from the radio and TV are these people pointing at each other about traffic. We have a different view on, we have a different perspective on why Metro Manila is so congested. And to be honest, we think it's no one's fault. It's 30 years worth of not putting the correct infrastructure. So before I go to our advocacy, I'd like to also talk a little bit about who Volvo is. My experience is here in the Philippines when I started selling the brand. Everyone had the impression that yes, I know they build cars, but never knew that they were in buses or trucks. In fact, in reality, Volvo Bus and Truck, they're one of the biggest commercial brands in the business, one of the oldest, born 1927 for truck and 1928 for buses. And our core values is safety, environmental sustainability, which is why we're one of the more bigger advocates of the point-to-point bus program of DOTC. And lastly, efficiency. Here in the Philippines, because we wanted to create a high-impact approach in moving our brand, we once upon a time took part in the point-to-point bus program of DOTC, which is now DOTR. So to give you a little background for the benefit of some people who are not so familiar. Well, if you remember the time when you listen to the radio, all you hear are the complaints of the people riding the MRT, the train in EDSA. So back then, the team in DOTC hatched an ambitious plan. What if, because they had limited resources and limited time, so they thought of this plan, what if we make car users shift into riding buses? provided we raise the standards, the service level for the bus service, the traditional bus service, high enough for it to be appealing for actual car users to use it on a daily or bi-daily or weekly or monthly basis. So back then, I've been in the bus industry for most of my adult life. Back then, to be honest, it was one of the most incredible programs, to the point that the major stakeholders in the bus business didn't really believe in it. I've had clients whom I've been selling it to who told me that it was a joke, that it's never going to work, so on, so forth. No? But we had no choice. We needed a showcase for our brand. So I told Volvo once upon a time, there's this little program, no one's interested. It's this silly program trying to make car users shift into riding the bus. And, well, Volvo told us, because they're one of the oldest brands, they work with 160 markets, they told us, you know what, it's not silly at all. That's how developed countries do it. No? Doesn't matter if you're a top executive in a bank, it doesn't matter if you're a rank and file officer or a new hire, you go to work using the bus. That's the role of the bus in every city. And it should come standard. It just so happened here in the Philippines that it's a hush-push of so many things that weren't really updated. So many policies that were not there. No? I'm going to talk about it later. So what we did, because no one would buy into the idea back then, we collaborated with Volvo. They told us we can take reference to many of our markets, a lot of them in India and in South America, where our advocacy is in its most mature form, I believe. So what we did, we bid for it using one of our business units, our RCG Transport, and we bid for the toughest route back then, Alabang to Greenbelt and Alabang in Ortigas. Toughest because it was the only P2P route back then with the Skyway. And a lot of our would-be clients weren't very keen on taking a route with huge toll costs integrated into the cost structure. And so when we won the bid because we were the only bidder. Yay. So when we won it, what we did, we tried to, after taking reference to so many successful stories of Volvo Bus in many of their markets, after so many engagements with people, citizens of cities from different markets, so kind of gave us that confidence that we were actually going the right direction. Even if we had to invest on premium buses, easily more expensive, twice as expensive as the traditional equipment that we were buying for that particular business unit. But because it was a project, we wanted to comply with the objective. We reached out to the communities in Muntinlupa, Ayala Alabang, Hillsboro. No? They were the ones, we reached out to the barangays, the associations, and with our eyes closed, we were explaining to them that we had the bus service and we were targeting themselves to use the bus. Anyway, fast forward around 12 months fast forward 12 challenging months, we were able to develop the market. Today, I'm just using Alabang, but there are a lot, right now there are at least 24 P2P routes linking different communities to business districts. But to date, we use Alabang as our showcase because it's one of the more mature markets that we have. We've gone past the 60% mark, wherein the profile of our ridership are actually car users. I actually, whenever we sell it to the bank, oftentimes they ask me, who's your market? Because outside it sounds incredible. I tell them, you'll never believe me. You just have to stand in front of my terminal in the mornings. Some are millionaires, some are billionaires. And that's what it is. It's become acceptable. A few weeks ago, I talked to an architect in our community, and he was telling me that it's not seen as a service anymore. It's seen as a movement in the southern community to the point that his neighbors were telling him, "You go to Makati every day. How come you're still bringing your car? That's silly. You should just ride the P2P bus." No? And it's really, it makes us happy how far we've gone. So when we back then, when we finally established a business case, a sustainable business case out of it, what we did, we went back to the biggest brands in the business, fleet operators, easily twice, thrice, 4 times bigger than ourselves, and we told them that it's not a joke. It's actually a sustainable business case, sustainable enough to use premium equipment, sustainable enough to use Euro 5 equipment, sustainable enough to use a Volvo bus. No? So after and every P2P bid, it's actually a collaboration. Eh. A lot of people think that it's just a bus operator's initiative. We call it a complete systems approach. It's actually every P2P line is a product of collaboration of one, the government agency, the main government agency, DOTR, and then you have the developers, the owners of the business districts, and the owners of the communities, and then you have the banks who support the bus operators for every bid. So that's what we did when we were able to come up with a sustainable business case out of it. We stitched everyone together and prepared for every bid. So these days, I always tell my clients, a Volvo supported bid is probably 90% good enough to make you move forward with a new route. So this experience that we had, it made us develop this advocacy because the accumulated experience talking to the passengers, trying to address each and every complaint they have with the service, it made us learn a lot of things. Eh. We were able to debunk a lot of myths about passengers, about car users. Eh. So at the end, we formed an advocacy. We call it Bringing Humanity Back to Bus Transport. What is it all about? We realized that, well, come to think of it, Volvo has these numbers. Eh. By 2050, 60% of the global population will be living in cities such as Metro Manila. That's where we're headed. Eh. And from one city to another, the rate at which the population is migrating to big cities like Metro Manila differs only by a few percentages. So it's not just a problem here in the Philippines. No? It's actually a global challenge. And Volvo, being an advocate of environmental sustainability, they took on that responsibility to actually answer those challenges. Eh. And using us here in the Philippines, what we do, we talk to as many stakeholders as we can, like yourselves, because we share the roads. You also use the road networks, your equipment, your employees, your staff. So we think the main drivers, the developers, the property developers, they will always be the main drivers of rapid urbanization. When you look around Metro Manila, you see these cities within a city within a city. They call it townships. No? Huge tracts of land develop rapidly into BPO buildings with commercial complexes and vertical residential communities, and nothing is wrong with that. Eh. That's really part. It comes in part with the economy developing. However, when you look at the big business districts, the old ones especially, you can see that transportation infrastructure, unlike all the other utilities in that city, was always left behind. Eh. Public transport is always an afterthought. So our main thrust is, and what are the consequences? We're very vocal that, absent any transport infrastructure at the planning stage of a township, you'll only end up with the same environment. Eh. we'll end up with pollution, congestion, and noise. Pollution, we believe that at least here in Metro Manila, we're already reaching the tipping point wherein the environmental effects, the impact of just using simply the car formula for everyone, given the limited infrastructure, given the density of Metro Manila, we're reaching that tipping point where the impact is already irreversible. And when you look at other industrialized cities here in Asia that grew rapidly but wasn't able to take into account that challenge, even with unlimited resources, they are not able, up to now, they are not able to address the challenge. We have suppliers abroad who live in those cities, and occasionally they have 3-day work weeks because of the smog. Occasionally they have 30-day audits wherein the government has to shut them down because they have to bring the smog down. And to think these countries have unlimited deep pockets. No? For us, we're a developing country, we work around a budget year on year. We'll be in a worse position if we come to that point. So here, let me share you this. I always use this picture. It's a very, very graphic illustration of what the bus, what the role of the bus is in every city. We have a basic computation. If you want to move 10,000 people, you need 2,000 cars. That's assuming that you have 5 people in every car, which rarely happens. But from one market to another, Volvo came up with this formula using what we call high-capacity buses. At best, these are the, if you've seen the bendy buses, articulated buses, you only need 40 to 47 of these high-capacity buses. 2,000 cars, to give you an idea, how much of our road networks that would cover, that's around 6 football fields of road space. And if you compare it to, say, 47 buses, that's around half a football field's worth of road space. They learned this in their experience in South America. And in South America, because from one city to another, it's become a trend for the past 40 years. A lot of cities experienced what we call urban recovery because they didn't need that much road space. They were able to use it for parks, for bikeways, no? And since it's not as expensive using a bus, for example, they have a bus rapid transit system in place in many of the cities in South America. It only equates to, from one market to another, it only equates to 5% of the cost of putting up a train. So in many of their the transportation infrastructures they set up, many of those are not subsidized by government. So that's also our experience. No P2P line here, for example, is subsidized by government. Everything is borne by the operator that operates it. If I can go to the next slide, please. So I hope you find this relevant, and because I know you're all in the logistics, most of you are in the logistics business. We have here this is the backbone of our advocacy. So basically, we tell developers that transportation infrastructure, it should be equally important as your sewers, your road networks, as your electrical grid. For it to be relevant to you, imagine a city without electricity. Imagine a city without sewers. Imagine a city without water lines. No? Imagine a city that looks premium from afar, but when you walk into it, you don't have roadways. You don't have sidewalks. We're telling developers that when you plan out your cities, transportation infrastructure, it should be there. And what's good now compared to what transportation is then, we think the team on top right now in the government, the DOTC, they're coming up with the right policies to champion this idea. They have what we call the Omnibus Franchising Code, meaning it's a opportunity for every city mayor or developer to reimagine their existing transport setup. So kung mali, if everything's messed up now, all is not lost. It just needs a lot of collaboration with many of the city's stakeholders. It needs a lot of collaboration with the developers and the incumbent operators, so on and so forth. No? So when you look at, we made the tree. This is, well, if you can imagine the priorities for planning out the city, this is one formula. You put the pedestrians and the bicycles when you plan out your road networks. You consider them, and then you have public transport. We believe that the bus should be at the center of every city, and then you have commercial traffic. Of course, prime movers of goods and services. After which you have the taxis and cars. This is how we see sustainable cities, smart cities should be planned out. And it can move, this setup can move the most number of passengers at the least number of time using the least number of road space, least amount of road space. And how does this impact the city? How does this impact yourselves? One thing we experience, no, whenever we open one P2P line to another, once you open a line with a bus, with that right level of service, you bring instant impact to that community. For example, in Alabang, first you didn't have P2P, now you have P2P. We have a client in Bulacan, which we think had one of the most backward systems set up. When we opened up the line, instantly the growth of their ridership easily surpassed any of the P2P routes that we opened. And from one community to another, we see that one community to another, we see that it's no different from what we experience in Alabang. So what we do these days, we share whatever accumulated knowledge we have in developing, in bringing out, deploying the right equipment, in trying to reach out the key stakeholders. We try to share these knowledge to other P2P operators. So next slide, please. So basically, this is in a nutshell. This is what we think. This is our imagination of what P2P is all about. It's bringing together all the stakeholders of a city, coming up with the right system, with the right service level, and by doing so, you come up with a sustainable, environmentally sustainable solution. It's not the only formula out there, I'm sure, but I believe it will take decades to plan and execute out a train system or a subway system. But for example, I remember we were required to operate within 48 hours of winning the bid. Very short time. No? So next slide. I'm showing, we prepared a video. Our in-house millennials at the office prepared a video for us today. But before I proceed, I'd like to talk a little bit about bus rapid transit. Anyone has heard the word bus rapid transit? But for everyone's benefit, more than 40 years ago, Volvo Bus supported a mayor in Corretiba. So there was this mayor who who envisioned that he had the same environment of what Metro Manila had now. You had hundreds of incumbent bus operators, no rule of law, there was no system in place, service level was very low, safety risk was very high. So that mayor was able to think of of an idea. He said, what if I come up with basically a train system, but instead of using trains, what if I use buses in dedicated lanes? So Volvo supported them back then. Volvo supported him back then, and they developed the concept. So we have here the key elements of BRT system. You have the exclusive busway, and then you have a high capacity bus. This is the articulated bus I was speaking of earlier. And then you have you have level boarding, meaning the stations work like a train station, and ticketing is done off board. And then we have telematics. Telematics basically, telemetry is basically each bus talking to each other, and then at the back room you have a control tower to monitor the movement of all the buses, just so the whole system runs as if it were a train system. So basically, that's what they have. This is a picture in, if I'm not mistaken, this is Mexico. Yeah. So you'll when we move forward with the video, you'll see a little bits and pieces about BRT. So it's good to understand what it's all about using the key elements. So can we play the video? So in a nutshell, kind of sums up everything that we... Thank you.